Alors, je vous propose...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start this meeting. First, welcome and thank you for being here today. So we'll have 45 minutes. Today, we'll be speaking about securing access in industrial environments and access of service providers. We need to make sure that we can avoid infection in industrial environment from external sources and see how we can take over service providers' access in an industry. I'm here with Carola, Pierre, and Sébastien, and I propose that we start now with a short presentation of our guests. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sébastien, work for the group of airports of Paris, in charge of SE Industrial, technical aircraft garage. So we focus on cybersecurity, especially when it comes to the IT, industrial IT, that's GTC, GTB, low voltage systems, public security, fire detection, sound, and more specific professions to the airports, that is safety on an airport. Thank you, Sébastien. Carola. I'm Carola, in charge, business manager, represent Action Cybersecurity, which is a structure of VINCI Energy, focusing on cybersecurity only, AT and OT, and we are organized around audits. We do security audits, safety audits, integration of security solutions, and managed services or management services. Pierre. Hi everyone, I'm Pierre Vidar, representing Actimium. It's an industry brand from VINCI, project manager for industrial information systems and industrial cybersecurity. Hi everyone, I'm Johan Delaunier, in charge of tools activities at WALLIX. So we focus on securing access for IDs and IT and OT environments. So we'll work on visibility, on traceability of access and so on. And we have a PAM for all offer, which is a global vision of security, which enables us to secure, control, and grant access to all users on all assets and all terminals at the right time and from anywhere. So now that we've presented ourselves, I propose that we directly tackle the subject of today. Today, we'll speak about securing access. We'll be listening to the feedback and experience of ADP, Aéroport de Paris. And Sébastien, I'm turning to you, looking at you right away. So this project started 3 years ago, I think. So you were like a pioneer when it comes to the cyber maturity that we can meet today in these industrial environments. So how did it start? What were your needs? How did you get interested by the WALLIX solution? And how did you work with Bastion, the security product of WALLIX? Well, at Group ADP, Aéroport de Paris, well, we decided that we needed more remote maintenance and remote operations. It means that there was a true risk on machines, a risk that we would not handle outside. So potentially we know that there can be internal risks. To reach the correct level of security, it implies a lot of work. So we focus on what we would master the least, that's remote access. Or control the least, remote access. So we wanted to better control our machinery, better control channels and flows that would be accepted remotely. And also wanted true traceability on what would be going on when it comes to remote operations. Additionally, we focus on the specific features of ADP. That is that we have a series of regulations that we need to respect to protect against cyber threats. So summing up, it means that here we have a functional need, security need, but also it's about regulations because we need to respect regulations. Okay. So with you here, you focus on work provided by Selectimium and their expertise. I don't know who wants to speak first. Can you explain how you considered working? Did you work together before? How do you consider working on this project? So at Actimiums, we've been working 20 years now with Aéroport de Paris. And personally, I've been working with Sebastian for 16 years on the maintenance of GTB. For a long time, we've been working on this together. And some 10 years ago, Sebastian said it was necessary to get skills on the Federation of Networks and different skills that were beyond our capacity. That's when we decided to work with the Synergy in our group and work with Axians to get them involved to support our client on those matters. And 5 years ago, we went one step further. We had a cybersecurity action involved in the partnership to support ADP on all topics like that are linked to cybersecurity. So today, ADP tells us about their security needs, and we speak with Axians to exchange and find the best solutions for ADP. Well, for us at Axions Cybersecurity, we focus on the presence of Actimium in the vertical industrial segment, and we come up with our cybersecurity experience. This is what we did at ADP level. So it's Axions. It's the two of us. So it's a duo with Axions and Actimium that provides support. You're a service provider also, right? Yes. Working on the environment of the Aéroport de Paris. So regarding the scope of your work, as it was said before, things you do, can you further detail what type of components you're working on, what type of security you need, what workstations and industrial components that there can be in this perimeter? The target perimeter was, well, all the automation control machines. That's the stations to deploy the new versions. Then we have the SCADA scope, that's the supervision of the systems that's been impacted by this remote maintenance. And then on a broader level, for the internal teams, we also have the possibility to have a remote access to what can be seen as the IT side of the industrial system. That's a management of different roles and solutions provided by IT. Now, if you take the Purdue model, today you have the high levels or high layers. Okay, we say there's like a DMZ between the IT and OT, or very split layers, or do you have another type of segmentation which is more open for the architecture? I don't know if you can enter into this level of detail. Well, that's the trend with all OT operators. That is that we start the segmentation of the network. And because of that, when we need to define the sets in Bastion, we need to select the right equipment that we want to cover and limit access to the entire network. So Bastion was useful there. It was hard we were hard with people at the beginning of the implementation. We would prohibit a lot of accesses. We wanted to target a lot some specific equipment. And with 5 years of experience, we focused on the IT, and we could use this tool in a DMZ, and we could improve good practices. Okay, and then project-wise, Axion, Scaola. Well, for the project, we started with a puck. I think it lasted 1 month, a bit over a month, yeah. This was followed by different service proposals for the Bastion, and then the pilot phase, and then the global deployment. And the POC phase, what was the purpose? Where there we could validate that we would respect an important item for us, which is the break of the protocol, a protocol break. So we would solve some external issues with the SIs. And then another important item for us is just to transfer skills. So here we could have the capacity to provide for this equipment and work with the users and machines and so on and so on. So here it's about functionalities, it's about security. Now when it comes to regulations, so this is a solution certified by ANSYS. I guess it's important for you when it comes to respecting some requirements. So yes, it is essential when it comes to choosing a solution. We need them to respect ANSI requirements. It's important for an operator. Actimium now with Pierre. So you were involved in the POC, you were a tester, part of the advisory board. Yeah, we were beta testers because of the relationship we've had with Sebastian for 15 years, you know. So we were among the first people that he spoke to test their Bastion. And we wanted to see the change when it comes to the VPN remote connections that they had before. Now, we were not advisors because that's for Axians. And with this tool, well, it's about feedback and experience. We are integrators. It's about using the tool. So what about different cases of usage? Sebastian, can you describe that? So do you meet, I don't know, 80% or 90% of the needs? Well, would like 100%, but so with Actimium, we work on supervision machines. They handle the power distribution in the terminals. So the needs that they had is that they wanted to identify a single machine, not identify an entire network. We would go over some protocols. So the solution at the beginning of the implementation was RDP. We would prohibit rebounding between machines to make sure that we would not affect the machine, all the machines. And from our standpoint, we were happy with part of the integration. And for Actimium, I think that there was no specific difficulty. And the fact is that we've slightly changed the working methods. We have less flexibility, more restrictions, I would say. So also going through Actimium, we wanted to have the feeling of what would go on with all our integrators. Okay. So this is something what regularly here. So you create the bastion, so the users will have more constraints. So it will slow down production, some claim. They want fast action, so on and so on. So what's your feedback on this, Pierre? Well, it's not always a perfect solution. Sometimes, of course, it adds a layer. It's less immediate. You have a need to ID yourself, but there are advantages. You need to have one thing in mind. As an integrator, we are a risk actor. So we are a risk vector. And because of that, if there's a security incident on the side of a client, it's our responsibility. So when it comes to ADP, like I said before, the previous connection method was with VPN. We worked in good understanding with ADP. We thought it was not what we would do with our system. So we had an internal tracing system and would inform ADP in case there was a need for connection to make sure that the machines would be available and then make sure that they knew that we are connected. So there, creating the bastion would add this small layer, but with a lot of advantages. One disadvantage, many advantages. To secure the infrastructure was good for the client, so we have walked away from some potential risks. The other advantage is that we have an inventory of all the machines we can access. So we no longer have to wonder if we can connect to a machine. We know the IP and so on. In our scope, we currently have access to 50 machines, IT machines. So through the management tool, we can directly access. Also, we feel better about the actions we carry out. When there's a security incident, we can identify this fast. And we can know that this is not due to something that we did. So there are constraints, but just a few constraints compared to the great advantages that we've seen. So thanks to this, we can feel better about what we do with the clients when it comes to improving their security. And the clients are happy with what we do and the integrators do, so they have a better understanding of what's going on. Yes, what Pierre said is important. All our integrators did not always inform us that they would connect remotely. So this bastion work forced them to go through approval to connect. So we are in an intermediate phase so far. So we do self-approbation today. The next stage will be that we have an ADP operator that will validate all the connections. It's important. Right, these are things we hear, especially the mapping exercise, the need for that. He said, okay, you had shortcuts, RDP shortcuts and connection MSTNC on my desktop. Now I log into a portal. I can access my resources in a clear and easy fashion, and I can connect transparently. More advantages. It's not slower. That's important. We look into the production level. Regarding the rest, I heard ADP, some SSH accesses. Yes, some accesses are granted. VNC, not yet. Now, in the different cases that we deal with at WALLIX, we have VNC requests. We still have a lot of VNC in the tool because of some sessions that should not close. So this is these are connections that we integrate with all the features linked to the VNC, the proprietary VNC features. A lot of requests on the industrial protocols for direct connections on automats. Is it something you're dealing with today? No. These are the two themes that we'll be handling in the future. So the VNC part implies a usage constraint, high constraints actually. But for the implementation of Bastion, we wanted to manage our perimeter. Then we wanted to open up and make sure that this solution would be secure. And then for the automats, this is something we've not been working on yet. All right, understood. A lot of requests there. And the Bastion helps support industrial protocols with direct connections for the automats. And these involve service providers to go there, to travel there, which is interesting. And also SCADA connections. So let's, if you want to access your supervision connection, but don't want the users to do anything else, but just look at the process. Is it something that you see? This is something we need to deal with internally. At the beginning of the Bastion, we spoke to our integration partners, and they have some admin rights with the units. They're integrating, deploying tools on these workstations, but now there's a need to limit access to the SCADA. And we have this need now with remote work, remote maintenance. That's grown since the COVID crisis, and there's an impact because employees and so on can work on that. So we have operators who have rights to modify. There, it's quite limited, but we'll need something there. We'll need some implementation there with the Bastion. Yeah, that's the interest. We need to define adapted security policies for the users who connect remotely. They don't always have the same rights. Okay, so deploying a bastion is providing structures. We have a build phase, which requires that you know the resources, but also the users. And there we need to work with different authorizations. For the run part, I'll speak to Carla now. How does it work on a daily basis now to find a solution? Is there any specific service that you provide, or they're autonomous? Yes, ADP is fully autonomous on the bastion. Yes, corresponds to what I said at the beginning. In the POC part, we pay great attention to the fact that we need to have the capacity to keep the tool up and running on our own. We don't always have the resources to do it, so it's important for us to have partners who have the necessary skills to do that. But we're doing a lot of changes and changes in the equipment, changes in users, and it's not the model that we usually do. We do not outsource it usually, so we want to keep our hand on the tool. All right. Any advice, recommendation for people in the room here? If they need to deploy a solution to limit access and privileges in an industrial environment, and I'll speak to the three of you, of course. Pierre, maybe? Any advice? What about user adoption and so on? That's the integrator viewpoint. And for the internal team, what really matters is that we need to communicate well towards people, internal staff or integrators, to make sure they join the approach. If you impose this type of solution, if people get opposed, they could imagine these are constraints. So you need to explain the needs. And for the integrators, you need to tell them, we know how it works. Many integrators have non-secured internet connections. We have to understand that this is no longer possible. There's a true risk for their clients and for their company. So in a plant, there could be a security incident because of a connection that an integrator created. So there could be a stop in the production line. So who will be responsible? Who will be held accountable? Then there can be contact with other integrators on the site. We need to see, okay, that the bastion implies some constraints, but what you need is communicate well and explain well why we need that, what the interest is to have a secure installation, because as an operator, you're reducing security incidents. That's my advice, at least. We need to provide a clear explanation on this work. If they agree with what you do, they will easily adopt the solution. Okay, voila. Deployment. Is POC a mandatory phase? Could you have gone faster? Well, the POC phase is essential. It is important to go through a POC phase that will enable us to not neglect the preparation phase. So technical and functional preparation, I mean. For the technical part, we'll study the architecture, the servers, the networks, etc., etc. And for the functional parts, we need to assess who's doing what. And for the future, through the bastion, we can say what will be the policy that we implement. Then I agree with Pierre when it comes to change. This is not something you should just leave on the side. We need to accompany and we need to communicate on the interest of the bastion in an infrastructure. So governance is important. It's also about usage adoption. It is essential, especially with the tools. Here we have a population which is not always familiar with this type of tools. They need easy access to resources, and they're really focused on the process more than on cybersecurity. So we recommend that teams get involved as much as possible and as early as possible. governance should not be neglected. Any other advice, Sebastian? No, nothing too different from what we heard. But internally at ADP, we need to raise awareness. This is what we did actually for people to support our work. There are barriers, constraints. I'm from the industry, so I can say that 4G modems next to a switch to easily connect because we want to deploy the project within the weekend. This is something that we did. But when you cut it and face the project part, they have needs to implement. They say you cannot connect like this anymore. You need to work differently. This is about politics. This is about education. It's very important. Then we add a new layer, which is not always understood. This is a strong IDing identification, strong passwords for all systems, because the integrators, well, potentially they can work on 3 or 4 information systems with the same password everywhere. Not anymore. They're all different. There, you need to add that we have a more secure connection with the patient. We do self-approval now, so we ask them to say why they're working, but automatically they can open their tunnel. Now, the next stage will be that they need to wait for the intervention of an operator. So it's about explaining people about cyber risks. And Pierre said it. For this part of the operation, it's about our integrators who are a risk factor. Okay, message received. No 4G connection, no easy passwords on the workstations at ADP. That is correct. This is the true challenge that we meet. And first, we need to centralize all this to get rid of these multiple and heterogeneous connections on the production part. Okay, so given the current architecture, you have Bastion. There are more functions that need to be implemented. We understand that. So what is the next step? The next step to actually speed up the process. So you have feedback on over 6 months to a year, right? Yes, with the COVID period, there was a big gap. So we did not use the full 3 years of the POC. So what is the next stage? So the next stage is the access manager to centralize everything, and I have one key access point. Today we have 3 silos with bastions which are not connected. So we will focus on that. So want to make up for the issue with some apps. We have RDS server that could be implemented to provide service providers with the tools. And then we want to add features on password rotation and the automatic management of passwords. Okay, better centralization, a more focused approach, passwords, secure access, direct securing of access, automats. Yeah, this is something that we need to do now for the automation. Pierre, Carola, any other thing you'd like to mention? Some challenges for the future with ADP and other clients of yours in the industry, I mean. Any other challenges coming up? And what would be your answer? Yes, one of the challenges we see with our clients is traceability. This is something, well, that they're tackling a lot. So with the Bastion, our clients can trace different accesses and they can trace back to whatever problem linked to cyber attack. This is something quite repetitive now. This is something that's very present with our clients, regardless of the client profile or the sector. Yes, we have a lot of requests on traceability for a cyber attack, but also just to make sure that we can find misfunctioning and to get back into the past to know who made a mistake by changing a variable. Now, for the industrial side, well, challenges remain similar. I met somebody this morning who wanted to make an inventory to know what is it that you have, who's got an access or not. So it's about the mapping exercise, about securing the network, segmenting the network. This is already a priority. And then one of the big question marks that we have today is how can we propose our clients to get the right solutions for remote connections? Because it's necessary to have requests for quick solutions, for surveillance and so on. At Actemium, with our solution, we're not implementing this type of tool to make modifications and interventions. We are here to find answers to a problem. We do some modifications, but on a punctual basis. We want to propose a secure solution that will enable us to take quick action. I mean, in the Paris area, so transport takes time, moving around Paris is time consuming. So this is what we would like to focus on. It's about securing workstations and then remote access. Okay, so we need to adapt to the new working conditions, to new environments. So to sum it all up, it's about easy usage, centralization of users, traceability, and then through the POC, it's about making sure that we can work on the list of specs and deal with the entire perimeter. I think we've mentioned everything. So, is there any question in the room? Are there questions? Maybe about Sebastian's experience? Hi. Easy question. Given your experience in your structure, who can best carry out this type of project and make a request? Is it an IT manager or security manager? I think that's a question for me. Well, my team has the skills for IT and cybersecurity now. They got the skills. A decision was made internally. There were regular exchanges with the DSI, and we decided on what objectives we needed to set. Now, the team is quite well skilled when it comes to the operations to actually perform and implement this type of project. Some additional information, if I may. What we see is that our SSIs carry out the projects defended by the IT and also by the tool side when it comes to usage. So there's a usage validation, technical validation, and then a project with the global RSSI. Yes, as an integrator, I would like to say the following. Well, we work with ADP, but we have other clients. What we see today is that we have the RSSI. Now, to keep these solutions up to date, it's not the people from the industry who should do it. Maybe except Sebastian's team, who got the necessary skills and got trained. But it's about the question about the location of the data and the equipment you want to access. Now, generally speaking, these systems are managed by the DSIs, and the systems are integrated into the infrastructure somehow, one way or another. I see that with some clients, with the progressive migration of IT systems, industrial autonomous systems, migrating to infrastructure, the infrastructure of the clients. Now, DSI service is quite legitimate when it comes to providing this solution. It's what they do. Now, if they want to access some infrastructure that cannot be accessed in this way, it makes no sense. So it really depends on the clients and the way they work. The migration of industrial systems into a client's infrastructure is not something that you just do overnight. You change from one word to another, different types of usage and new problems. Hello, I have different questions. Usage, is it only for service providers or also for internal teams, if any? Are there internal teams handling the equipment? And for the internal teams, how do you make sure that they go through the bastion, and what is the level of compartments that you have, and how do you prevent rebounding from one machine to another? So network compartments and so on. How do you articulate all that to make sure that bastion is a single waypoint, access point? So access, that's for the ADP employees and service providers. We have both cases. Then we've been working on the segmentation of the network. So we have good compartments now. This allows us to better target the machines. Before the bastion, we had VPN connections and SSL connections. We would be open to broader networks, and we would not be able to handle the interconnections. Then we'd direct to something else. So the bastion, because of its position in infrastructure, becomes the single entry point, and the specific feature is that in one of our objectives was to prevent rebound. Now, if you're just logging in internally or externally, you have a profile, list of equipment. You can only access a specific machine. The rebounding is prohibited. This is why we blocked the VNC from a period of time, because we were not certain how it would work. And now we know that we'll be improving again. And testing was done in partnership with Actimium. We only wanted to target the right machine. Yes. In addition, I'd like to say the following. Many clients start with securing access, external access, service providers access, and once it is secured, they'll move on with the security of internal access. Then security or fine-tuned, more precise security in passwords, which is last, with rotation for passwords and strong passwords and so on. Our bounce backs, we have mechanisms in the session which avoid bouncing back on some machines on a specific connection. So we have different mechanisms to put limitations on the user's behavior. We allow them to access one machine, and then we'll control the behavior on that machine. Then we can use other mechanisms. It's about the publication of apps. So we're not going to publish the entire desktop of the station, only the app. So the user cannot actually rebound and use a second application to have lateral movements. So we have different mechanisms to reduce the risks. So how does it happen, this connection to bastion? What type of IDing or identification? Strong words or passwords with Kerberos, or we're compatible with the standards on the market. So we'll work with existing IDPs to secure all types of identifications. Hi. Just a question on the integration with the SCADA and automat systems. These systems are very different from each other. Do you have specific development on the WALLIX platform? Would you have another publication method? There we use a specific function, which is the universal tunneling. It allows us to create a secure tunnel from the machine of the service provider, the user, to the bastion. So we have a tunnel. It is secure after the authentication and workflow and so on. And through this tunnel, we can actually forward TCP protocols. So we make a diagnosis of the protocols. If you have a low TCP protocol, you forward it to the tunnel. So we allow for connection from a software, registered software, to an IHM or an automat. And the bastion will only allow connection for a specific IP and port. So the user can use his own environment, his own software, admin software remotely, and connect to the automat live. So this is how we handle these cases. So we'll have full traceability on the connections, who connected when and how to do what. Hello? You do session recordings that you could replay to actually look at what happened. Yes, we do. It was actually the point. We wanted to replay a session, not just a cyber incident, but also an exploitation incident. Wanted to replay it to see what happened, a register that was changed, and so on and so on. So that's what we wanted to see. So everything is recorded. It can be replayed. Also the RDP. Can you see it live? We can do it live. We can interact with the ongoing session. We can join the ongoing session to work jointly. And then we do all the recording. Video format. Also we collect metadata. We collect all the information about the process and services executed on a remote machine, keyboard entries and so on. And we can read what happened precisely. And finally, the metadata is more relevant to the video. The video can be long, etc. But with the metadata, we have more possibilities. So we record everything. Ask question. Can you do RDP that's encapsulated into HTML? HTML5. RDA with the HTML gateway, you know? Okay. So the connection of the user on the portal, that's Access Manager, is HTTPL. Then we have a RDP connection. And so we have a user who's in web mode. Then we open RDP sessions. That's tabs. And the interface is HTML5. And each tab is a new session that's open parallelly. We can do drag and drop from one session to another. The answer is yes. Two questions. You spoke about the choice that was validated by ANSI. Can you explain that? What is this validation about? What rules do you have to respect or certification? Question 2. It's about the POC. Do you have a POC for this only, this solution only? And how did this solution impose itself better than others, I'll answer your questions at once. First, ADP has specificities, We need to pay great attention to what is edited and validated by ANSI. So of course it had an impact on our choice. When we started, there was no other solution. And that's why we made that choice. So clearly, it's very important and it supports us in our solutions. We wanted to get something that would be certified. That's a CSPN certification. Hope I answered all your questions. I chose that option. This is linked to our structure, our capacity to produce POCs, it takes time. Now, if you work with a product that's certified, we have an exchange with our RSSI. Then we started on the POC and there we chose to go for a product. We didn't compare with other solutions. Question on the degraded mode between the target equipment and the bastion. How do you handle this connection to debug? So what about the downgraded mode? It's not critical. We can tell the operator it's not too bad. They have a contract that's forcing them to come on location for the most critical systems. We can do without remote operations if necessary. This is what we claim when we give access to people, actually. We say that it is not a need and we can have some weaknesses. Now there are ways to go around such critical situations. You can give access through a VPN with special user codes and so on to directly access our system. But we haven't done it so far, except with tests. And additionally, in the architecture, we have repetition, redundancy, ice-breaking mechanisms to recover secrets, in case there's a problem on the bastion. So different mechanisms that give us some freedom in case there's a problem with this critical component. All right, conclusion. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your questions. And if you have any other question, come and see us, please. We'll be happy to speak to you. Thank you, everyone.